Bullshit. The No BS Show is brought to you by Audible.com. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/NoBS. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. It's the No BS Marketing Show. I'm Dave Mastovich. Our guest today is Rick Irwin. But first, let's hit the bullseye. During my No BS Marketing workshops for C-suite leaders, we spend a lot of time on segmentation. I appreciate the desire of senior leaders to want to learn how they can segment better. It seems regardless of level in an organization or job responsibilities, many people barely scratch the surface as to leveraging the power of segmentation. It made me wonder why that's the case. The Mass Solutions team continually digs for research, white papers, blogs, speaker talks, and anything else we can find to help our client and loyal No BSers like you, our listeners. In doing so, we've come across what might be the introduction to segmentation. The date might surprise you. In March of 1964, an article in Harvard Business Review by Daniel Yankelovich, owner of Viewpoint, a market research firm, talked about the need to master the vast amount of information resulting from the information revolution. Imagine that. He describes the information revolution of 1964, which I'm sure was big to that point, but probably not as big as the information revolution of the past 20 years. Yankelovich writes this: in this article, I shall propose such a method. It is called segmentation analysis. It's based on the proposition that once you discover the most useful ways of segmenting a market, you have produced the beginnings of a sound marketing strategy. He goes on to say that segmentation is developed out of some key premises that still ring true more than 50 years later. Listen to these and see if they don't still apply. These are from Yankelovich's article of 1964. In today's economy, each brand appears to sell effectively to only certain segments of any market and not to the whole market. Second bullet, sound marketing objectives depend on knowledge of how segments which produce the most customers for a company's brands differ in requirements and susceptibilities from the segments which produce the largest number of customers for competitive brands. Third point, traditional demographic methods of market segmentation do not usually provide this knowledge. Analysis of market segments by age, sex, geography, and income level are not likely to provide as much direction for marketing strategy as management requires. Once the marketing director does discover the most pragmatically useful way of segmenting his market, it becomes a new standard for almost all his evaluations. He'll use it to appraise competitive strengths and vulnerabilities, to plan his product line, to determine his advertising and selling strategy, and to set precise marketing objectives against which performance can later be measured. Specifically, segmentation is key. Now, when you think about that, that's from all the way back in 1964 in a Harvard Business Review article. And it's telling you what we say at this workshop. When we challenge CEOs, CFOs, and COOs in these workshops to look at their segments and have at least 5 different variables. When we say that, people go, what? And they get through the first, second, and third pretty easily, and they struggle to come up with a 4th variable. But if you're not segmenting your target audiences by at least 5 unique variables, you're missing opportunities. You need to do the real drill down and then develop creative marketing solutions tailored to each segment. In other words, you need to make sure your no BS marketing hits the bullseye. Our guest today is Rick Irwin, the CEO of IntegraCare Corporation, a senior assisted living company that operates 11 communities in Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Virginia. IntegraCare focuses on improving the lives of employees because they'll improve the lives of residents and the residents' families. In episode 1, Rick and I talked a lot about mission statements and values and how a leader's role is to inspire people and to help them grow, and how leaders behave is really important. Just the words are often what's thrown out there, and there isn't the clarity around the behaviors associated with the words in your mission, vision, and values. And leaders need to bring that clarity through over-communication and through their behaviors. Then towards the end of our first part of the 2 parts with Rick, he started digging into how IntegraCare had to work with private equity and venture capital to get money to expand, to acquire communities that fit their profile, that fit their segmentation analysis of what they wanted to buy. He was humble and transparent in saying how in the early years, he and Lorianne Poutier, his partner, weren't great at that yet. And so they went through a lot of iterations of how they were going to do that with private equity companies. And that brings us to part 2, where Rick can tell us more about that, the relationships to get that financing, and then what kind of communities they do purchase, and some of the success stories and how they got there through leadership and communication. Rick, welcome back to part 2.
Thanks, Dave.
Let's have at it then. Start talking a little bit about the once you get the financing, how do you decide which properties to purchase? What do you do to turn them around?
We look for opportunities to add the things that we do well. And if those things that we do well are the elements that will make the difference, then that's a property that we would want to move forward with. There are certain properties that no matter what we would do, no matter what our core competencies are, that's not going to fix it. So I think we start with an honest assessment of what we can and can't do, and then we try to match that to those opportunities that need what we do. We can't fix everything, right? Of course. However, I really think if you watch The Prophet, or if you watch many of those other shows that restaurant turnaround, hotel turnaround, so many of the concepts in those shows are the same concepts, and I think, the physical plant, the how you present yourself from a marketing standpoint. But also for us, it still goes back to having the right on-site leadership. And, what we've learned many times is we've always tried to maintain the leadership that's been there. However, we found that most of the time that leadership, even though those properties are many times in bankruptcy, that leadership fails to see that things have to change in order for the business to be successful. They are in denial. And I think, all of us to some degree are in denial about certain things. It's hardest to not be in denial about your own personal weaknesses as a leader. We all think we're great leaders, right? We all think we're great employers. You can go to the crummiest business run by the biggest knucklehead, and you ask him, if he'll tell you, all my people love me. In the meantime, they hate him. So the real issue is we have failed all the time by trying to keep the existing leader in place. And we still would do that. We still would give people a chance, but we would be quicker to make the change when they not only don't embrace the turnaround efforts, but to actually try to undermine them, which is generally the case. So because it's only human nature. If somebody comes in, you're running the business, you have to admit that you've been running it poorly, right? To accept all the changes that need to be made that a professional management will come in and ask. Well, it's just very hard for us as human beings to just go, yeah, I was screwing that thing up. This is a better way. Who has enough character to do that? We haven't run into that person yet that would make that confession, so to speak. So many times when these communities have 60 to 100 and some employees, and initially there's a pushback, and we must earn their trust. We must, and after time, they see that we're there to help. We're not there to oversee. We're not there to pick, at and criticize. We're really there to add resources, reposition, give them the tools they need to be successful, and therefore make their jobs better. And so that generally takes a year and a half. This is not an overnight thing, because when you are, leading a business that's sort of abrupt, the abrupt change, many times those existing leaders have a management style that sort of, I'm protecting you against the new company. They want to fire you, but you be loyal to me. Those stories are told a lot. where that undermines everything we're trying to do. And so, we've had, we have had no success in keeping existing management. I would hate to say that you'll never have success in doing that, but at least so far, in probably the 15 or so we've done, we have not had success.
You mentioned you learned from that experience. Did you used to try to go through square peg, round hole, banging your head against the wall, whatever cliche, for a year and a half with that person, and now you realize going to lay out the terms and say, let's get this going. If you're with us, great. If you succeed, great. And you end up exiting them in 90 to 100 days now? Is it something like that? Or
it's longer than that, but yes, we would hang too long. There's no question. And we would, have those discussions, and the person would agree. The person's not going to disagree, right? These are remote locations. So we go back to the home office, and that person's in charge, and that person's telling all the staff, either they could be spinning the story wrong to the staff, undermining our company and our company's values. And that is the common situation that happens, where they are just, when we go to implement our policies and procedures, they push back, meaning I would say the consistent quality of these properties that are not performing is the lack of systems, policies, procedures, accountability, and transparent management. So when we arrive, we're putting all these systems in, and these are reporting systems basically on resident care, on sales efforts, on cost control, on human resources costs. And many times we're coming there and raising salaries also, because these properties are in financial distress. They can't, and we're able to do that, which is a positive, right? But even under those cases, when we're doing that, especially to the department heads, those systems are intimidating. Generally, in these non-performing properties, they've just run their own. They don't have to adhere to a budget. They just spend whatever is needed. If the money's not there, they don't spend it. And now when you have consistent controls on the sales effort, on the marketing effort, on the labor costs, on the physical plant management and quality standards, for people who have never worked with those, that's intimidating, and the accountability goes way up.
Systems and processes are one of the 3 or 4 major things of any company and any leader. So I can see that happening where you come in and you're communicating, and I've seen this because I've helped with this from time to time, where you come into the new property and you're focused on the internal communication, focused on the employee meetings, focused on having your regional leadership team. You have regional leaders in each of the main disciplines coming down and spending time. You and Lorianne spend time. So you're saying during that process, you're getting the word out, and some people are on the fence, some people kind of get on board, and some are naysayers. And then sometimes existing management ends up not helping with that communication, sometimes even thwarting it.
Right. Existing management undermines it. Don't listen to that. I mean, we've had the quotes. There are always those employees that embrace what we're trying to do, and they see the counterproductiveness of the management, management, the legacy management
Yes.
that we've inherited. And they will tell us, they will say, no, right after you left, we were told just to forget all that stuff. And so it's just a very predictable thing, unfortunately. And, it goes to also the families of our customers. What are they being told? And so we now have direct family meetings. We have, so that they can hear and see us and ask us questions. And we've just found that it's most effective. But to your point, we have suffered and had not only our investors suffer, but the other team members on site that we inherited suffer from the lack of cohesion and camaraderie between the company and the management on site. Who suffers the most from that dysfunction? It's the existing staff who are just there trying to do their job and take care of residents, and the residents themselves. And so it's really our accountability when that happens to get the right management in place so that that doesn't continue.
The No BS Show is brought to you by Audible.com. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at audibletry.com/NoBS. Try a book like The Fifth Discipline, The Art and Practice of the Learning Organization by Peter Senge. Lorianne definitely read that book. I'm certain of it. You can download it for free today. Go to audibletry.com/NoBS. Again, that's audibletry.com/NoBS for your free audiobook. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. Key point here, you're talking about how when you take over and hope to fix a near bankrupt or in bankruptcy or a very distressed senior living community, it's not as much the everyday employees that are the challenge as the existing management is.
That's right. That's right.
So you come in and talk to the existing management, talk to existing employees, do a whole lot of communications, attempt to over-communicate. You're being thwarted by a manager or management team that doesn't quite understand that they were in this distressed status, so the way they were doing it couldn't be possibly right. And so they have to be educated and changed or exited out.
Right. And it just starts generally with the executive director. And many times in that distress situation, the employees are getting paid regularly, just like they have been paid when a property performs. It's just that the existing lenders and or investors have to write the checks to keep the payroll as opposed to the revenue from the operation of the property. But to that hourly worker or to many of the employees, I keep getting my check, I'm fine. And so also many owners in those properties have zero transparency towards the staff, towards their executive director. So they really never see the financials. Our company, our managers see all the financials. But, many operators are like, well, if we're making a lot of money, we don't want our employees to see that, our managers. Well, we share all of that. And I think as a manager, when you have responsibility for a budget and you see how that budget fits into the rest of the whole set of financials, it's easier for you to understand why that budget has to be, you have to try to make that budget. You have to, have those cost controls and revenue expectations.
Now I want to go the other direction because it is the No BS Marketing Show. So I'm going to put you on the spot. Think back to a time in your career when maybe you were the BSer, or maybe you were the difficult employee, the tough senior manager for the owner, or you were a tough boss, or maybe it's just a time when you didn't communicate well. And what did you learn from it that might help our audience? So when you were the BSer.
When I first got out of school, I worked for 3M selling copy machines door to door. And that's a long time ago. That's almost 40 years ago. And sales techniques have changed greatly in that time frame. We were trained in highly manipulative sales techniques, multiple closes, sort of entrapment phrases to push somebody or manipulate somebody into buying a copy machine. And it was a door-to-door business. I had the downtown Pittsburgh territory. And what I noticed there was that the top salespeople didn't do the training. They didn't, I bought into it. I was naive. Okay, these people know more than me. They must be smarter than me. I'm going to adhere to this. And the reaction I got in selling to these decision makers was some very negative reaction because it was, and my father was a businessman and he told me, he said, this stuff they're teaching you, that's all baloney. That's BS, but it's a big company like 3M. They have, fancy offices and these video training systems and all these incentives. So for a time, I bought into that and was, it was no fun. There wasn't any enjoyment in that job until one of the senior guys there basically said to me, Rick, are you really buying into what they say? Are you actually going out and trying to sell in this system? And I'm like, yeah. He says, well, that's not going to work. You have to basically get to know that customer, get to know their needs. If our machine matches what they need, you tell them and you show them. If it doesn't, you cut it off right there and you go find somebody who's a match for us. And then my job became much easier and I did much better at it. It was always a difficult job and I got out of it, but it was high paying for that time. And it was a great, door-to-door selling, which they're no longer sold that way, but door-to-door selling, cold calling. We had to do 50 cold phone calls a day. We had to make 20 on a day when you're out knocking on doors, at least 20 calls. All that rejection just proved that when all else fails, work harder. Persistence will overcome a lot of sins. And though that is a lesson I pulled out of that. One, that BS doesn't really work anyway. You might get you by for a while, but especially that the higher levels you go to, the BS is just weak, cowardly, and ineffective. And so, again, if you have nothing to hide, or nothing to fear, if you have nothing to hide, is just a great way to live and is a great way to work.
That's a story about when you were coming out. So now it's around graduation time for college graduates. Right around the time we're airing this, they've just got out. They're going through their first jobs or they're in the midst of interviewing. What's something you would give as advice to a recent college grad this year or someone that only has a year or two in their field?
I guess it depends on, what college. I think I've learned now through meeting a lot of people from the Ivy League colleges, their graduation is a lot different than most people. But if you're like someone who's average like myself and graduating from a state school, and you are not like, you didn't go to school to be a doctor, right? The path is clear for you. You're going to, I don't know what advice I'd have for that person. The path is clear. But for most of us, when we get out of school, the path is not so clear. And so how do I really decide, kind of my first advice is I would get a job with the company that gives me the most autonomy. The thing I'm grateful for in working with poor bosses is that I think I benefited from their lack of helping, their lack of mentoring, their lack of direction and communication, to where it was all on me. And that's really the lesson you have to learn anyway in life. It's always all on you. But if you get with a highly organized company that has all that training, that's really good too. But you may not learn the self-reliant skills, and you may always be what I would call the corporate man, who really isn't a self-initiator, but just somebody, and I don't want to say it in those words because there's a lot of good people doing that, somebody whose success is really a result of just following the corporate guidelines. Now that's a good way to live too, and many people have done that. But back to the success, what I'd give to, I really think the attitude that, hey, I'm just out of school. I'm really here to learn. I understand I don't have a ton to offer because I don't have this practical experience in but what I'm here to do is to learn, work hard, and I know my place. I don't have the expectation to be a vice president in 2 weeks or a partner in the company in 2 weeks. And it's a sense of humility with a sense of persistence and some aggression in passion in just, I want to be good at this. If you sense that energy, I want to be good at this. I don't know it, but I want to be good at it. And I'm going to throw myself into it. That's what employers, I think many good employers want to hear. And I'm talking about jobs where, many jobs today you're hired on credentials, you're hired on your grades. Do I have the software engineering skills, or do I have an engineering degree? Those are different, but I think most people are coming out and it's their personality and their drive that needs to be on display.
So I have to go down a path here because I had this great guest, a managing partner of a law firm, a guy by the name of Chris Brodman. And in the midst of his conversation about his journey, he talked about how he didn't get good grades in college. And it blew up. All kinds of people texting and emailing and posting and reposting and liking it and following. So I guess it hit a spot with people that maybe college, their grades weren't their foremost thought. So I started going down the path of asking this more often, and I'm actually putting together an actual show that's going to focus on the grades as a standpoint, because while I think I certainly don't want to see, I have sons about to enter college and so forth, I don't want to see them say like, oh, who cares what the grades are? But what kind of grades did you get, and how do you feel about that as far as you're 19, 20, 21 years old, and what's the difference between a 2.4 and a 3.2?
Right. And so, I was like a 2.75 at Penn State. So, I was a brilliant scholar.
Yes.
Yeah. So I know a lot of people that are very smart, and I have learned to respect that innate intelligence. But I don't have that. My kids don't have that. And so I can't do anything about that. Right. What I can do is my persistence and hard work. And so there is a sense in today's culture a little bit, and we hear about it, and I don't want to jump on the bandwagon, but a sense of entitlement. I've got my MBA. I've got this college degree, where, it's kind of a joke, actually, meaning if you're just coming right out of school, what do you have to really make a difference in an organization? It's not much. So if you're a person who understands that and realizes that, and you in a sense confess that, even in an interview, without being depreciating, because the person you're interviewing with already knows that. They already know you have no experience. But to actually express it, and express even, imagine a sense of gratitude for the interview and a sense of gratitude if you would get the job. Those are unheard of qualities today, and so there, obviously there are professions that require a high level of intelligence. If you're going to be a neurosurgeon, whatever, you have to have a God-given qualities, or you're not going to do it. It's like, if I want to be a professional football player, that I can try as hard as I want, but it ain't going to happen. So for most of us, average people, what's the differentiator? And, there used to be a saying that, the A students are all in government and in banking, and the B and C students are the entrepreneurs making a lot of money. I don't know if that's really true anymore. Probably less true now than it was years ago, but it does boil down to hard work and persistence. And if you're part of an organization, it does boil down to somebody who shows that organization they're with that they are grateful for the opportunity that organization has presented. If you want to endear yourself, show genuine gratitude for something, genuine gratitude for an opportunity, genuine gratitude and thanks for somebody who recognizes your efforts.
Great advice. Great advice. That's if more people would live by that when they're coming into the early in their career, it would make a huge difference. Rick Irwin, CEO of IntegraCare, what else did you think I would ask you that I didn't, or anything else you want to mention about your company or your journey?
No, I think we covered it. I think we did hit. I don't have a lot more to offer. you drained the tank.
Well, thanks for being here, Rick.
Thank you, Dave.
Really appreciate it. To our listeners, thanks for joining us for the No BS Marketing Show, brought to you by Audible.com. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/nobs. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. Visit masssolutions.biz for show notes plus additional marketing and messaging resources. Sign up for the No BS Marketing Weekly Update. You'll receive timely, valuable ideas to improve your message and your marketing. To sign up, visit masssolutions.biz. Remember, ask yourself, what's the big idea? And build your story around the answer. It's all about bold solutions